first of all, it was pretty cool how we got connected, because there's a guy who follows me on Twitter, Drew Bennett. He's at Ben Spark, and I had written a children's book as well, called Different is Awesome, and it has a character who has one hand, and his kid has the book. He then read your book and was like, "Hey, this is like that. This is like that other book," and so he pointed it out, which I was super grateful for. So I ran out and bought it right away, and was just like, "Oh, this is so awesome!" And so we will talk about that for sure. But I did have a couple other questions for you, maybe to start. If people aren't aware of your work or familiar with it, could you maybe just share a little bit about your work and what people can find?
Yeah, so most of my work, most people know my Star Wars books. So I've done a series starting with Darth Vader and Son, with um, Luke and Leia as little kids, and Vader having to be the parent. And that had led me to doing a lot of middle grade books, starting with the Jedi Academy series, which is basically middle school set in the Star Wars universe. And then I've done a couple other series, Lucy and Andy Neanderthal and Space Time, which are just the Neanderthal series is about kids living in the Stone Age, and Space Time is about two kids who get to explore the galaxy with aliens. And then my newest middle grade book is Batman and Robin and Howard, and it's the story of Robin is Damian Wayne, Bruce Wayne's son, and so his dad is Batman, and the story is kind of about him dealing with his own life, and then meeting this kid Howard, who kind of becomes a rival, and they learn to work together.
hmm Yeah, it's awesome. I will say, I mean, I read it in one sitting when I brought it home. Super fun. A couple of my friends have had their kids read it, so I'm whatever I am, 44 now, and my friend's kid's like 8, and we all loved it. And so, well, I want to talk about that as well. But there was one thing I kind of wanted to ask you, as a writer myself. Also, it's always interesting to me to hear kind of how people found their voice. And so, I had heard you in another interview talking about how they were like, "Well, would you write, for like a serious DC comic?" And you had kind of said, "I have had some ideas, but that isn't my voice. Like that isn't
Yeah.
what I do." Like I loved what you said about your voice is humor and emotion, and that's what you want to come through your projects. And so, what did that look like for you to kind of find that over time?
I mean, it in a way it was always there, and it was just
Sure.
a case of me ignoring it
Yeah.
to varying degrees over the years. Like when I was a kid, I liked superhero comics and I liked Garfield. And
Mm,
and so my superhero comics were, in the gritty 80s mode, where they were like just,
mhm.
it's Wolverine and Batman, just all beaten up and just
Right.
rising above it to defeat the villain at the end. And then there was Garfield, who, is just eating lasagna and being funny,
Mondays.
hating Mondays. So and then there, over the years, like I got into different comics. I got into like adult alternative comics and underground comics and
Mhm,
European comics that were more serious. But I drifted away from drawing comics and turned to fine art.
mm,
Um, and it was while I was in art school, thinking I was going to be a painter, that I had some, like, I wasn't happy with the work. It didn't feel right.
mm,
Um, but my sketchbooks were still filled with like lots of funny, humorous comics, a lot of everyday life stuff.
Sure.
Um, a lot of just working through my emotions, I guess.
hmm
Um, and I kind of hit this point where I was like, I need to reset my art
mm,
making. And when I was a kid, making comics was fun. I'll just write some. I started writing these autobiographical comics,
okay.
and that just, I was like, this is it. And
Yeah.
another thing that happened in one of my critiques is the everyone was looking at my sketchbooks versus the paintings on the wall, and they were like, what's missing from these paintings? And someone
mm,
someone said, it's like the humor. And
Yeah.
then, it's like, oh, it's just having someone point out something that's
Right.
like obvious when once you realize it.
Sure.
um and it's like, yeah, I like making funny comics, even when
Mm,
it's, dealing with serious, emotional, heavy subjects. It's like,
sure.
um, yeah. So it was just a process, and then, you know, I just embraced it in my autobiographical comics that were about relationships and adult serious stuff were still humor and making fun of myself and making fun of
Sure.
like the awkward everyday moments. And then I also did like lots of just straight up humorous parody and just goofy off the wall stuff. And
Right.
over time, those two kind of, I feel like, have met with each other with the work that I do now, where it's like it's humorous, but a lot of like stuff in Batman and Robin and Howard is about thinking back to my experiences of how childhood friendships form and
Yeah.
things like that.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. And it's, I'll plug for any parents of kids who are also Star Wars fans. Like, get the Vader books, like, because it's, you're right. Like, the humor, it's one of those things. Like, I do some speaking as well at schools, and I always have stuff in there for the teachers, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
so I'd be speaking to the kids, but there are things that are going to go over their head that go to the teachers. And it's the same in these books, I feel like, where you're speaking to a younger audience, but there's so much in there that connects to me as a dad that the kid's not even going to get. Like,
yeah,
it's funny, but it's funny on a different level, to the parent. And so it's really cool to me how you're able to kind of combine those things. Like you said, you're able to take, and let's talk about the new book here too. Like you said, story of a kid who goes to a new school, and it's that, the what do I want to call it? The complex relationship
hmm,
building that happens. It isn't a friends at first sight type of thing.
yeah,
And I really appreciated that about the book, that um, it's true to life. Like, it isn't easy. Like, things are difficult, and there's challenges. Even, the good kid, um has trouble. Like,
yeah,
he's intimidated. He feels like he's challenged. His place in the school, in his world, is now suddenly challenged, and he's figuring out, oh, this is how I respond to that. And so I love that aspect, to that relationship, in this book. And beyond that, like, just the story. Like, for me, any kids books, priority number one is that it's a good story, right? And
hmm,
so, I love that the story itself is great, and then it has layers of things to kind of uncover as you go through. um, and so I did want to touch on, I think, the thing that's pretty obvious that stuck out to me and that was brought to my attention, is that one of the characters in the book, has one hand, which, you can't see it here. Here's my here's my one hand. Here's the one that's not. I was born like this, and for me growing up, I was born a long time ago, 77, and so when I was a kid, there was nothing really to look for. Like, Jim Abbott
hmm,
was a pitcher in baseball, and he was my hero, and that was about it. Like, I didn't have comics or cartoons or movies or anything
hmm,
to look towards. I didn't There was no Facebook, there was nothing to search online. And so it wasn't really even an idea in my head to try to find someone who looked like me. And now, obviously, that's completely different. Like, any kid can jump online and search for whatever they want instantaneously. And so representation is such a huge, thing in the world right now, and so important. And so I love what you did here. And so, if you could just kind of explain how that came to be, and just that, the thought process for you for including a character. Like, he's not a main character, he's just one of the friends, and he's just there throughout the book, which I absolutely love. So if you could tell us about that a little bit, that'd be
yeah.
amazing.
So I mean, I think um, a, diversity is something that I definitely was not aware of when I was a kid. Growing up
Hmm.
in late '70s, early '80s was just I was just oblivious to a lot of
Yeah.
things. And even starting my comics career, it was like I like to think that I'm progressive or something, but like over time you realize like, oh, I'm still way behind
Right.
where I should be. And so especially with the books that I do, I keep trying to make that a point. And for this book, so so I wanted to have like a diverse cast around Damien, especially not to make it like a super big point, but Damien is a rich white kid,
Yeah.
for
Right.
lack of to put it bluntly. And so,
Yep.
I wanted to put him in a world that showed a lot more diversity, and part of
Sure.
that was showing someone with a disability. And
Mhm.
um so there's a kid, Pete, who has a congenital limb deficiency. And um I think it's really easy for for that to become like a plot point, or
Mhm.
it becomes something that like the an author might feel that they need to do something specifically related to that aspect
Right.
to justify it being there or something. and
Sure.
and so for this book especially, I just thought, I just want to have that character have that. And
Mhm.
it doesn't it's just a normal everyday thing. And part
Right.
of it is based on my own experience with um, getting lunch at a cafeteria every week, where the woman running the cash register had congenital limb deficiency. And
Mhm.
it just didn't, it was just normal. Like,
Right.
visually you see it, but in all other practical ways, like, there's no difference
Right.
than anything, any way you would go about your day otherwise. So
Right.
I just wanted to have it, just it's there, it's something that's in the world, and it's normal. And
Mhm.
it doesn't need to be like a huge deal for anyone.
Right. Yeah, that's it's so true. I think especially if it's in whatever in the media somewhere, it tends to either be they're a hero or they get sympathy. Like those
Mhm.
are kind of the two options that people like, oh, that's too bad, or well, it's okay. They'll still be a hero. And it's like in reality, most of us are just normal people. Like, and
Yeah.
so, you have a sixth grader who has one hand. He's just a sixth grader who has one hand and he's just hanging out with his friends and he's playing soccer and and so I love that aspect of it as well. Um, and it's funny because um, it's a big deal to see it on the screen or on a page. And if you don't have a difference like that, you don't really get it. Like,
Mhm.
like for me, if I see a white guy on the screen, I don't go, oh, hey, there's someone who looks like me, because there's white guys
Right.
everywhere. you
Right.
know but when I see someone, I saw a friend of mine, my friend Angel, is on a Walmart commercial and she has one hand, and I was like, there's that's awesome. Or in a
Yeah.
Target ad or whatever. It's just one of those little things, like you said, where you say, hey, yeah, we're part of it. Like, we're part of society. Like, include us
Mhm.
in it. And so you don't have to make me the hero, but just I'd like to be a part of it. And so I think that I loved that about the story, that Pete just gets to be one of the friends who's a
Yeah,
part of the story.
definitely.
Yeah. So I know for me, before I had written my book, I had the idea for it. And there's another author, Judith Casely, who long time ago, she wrote a book called Harry, Willie, and Carrot Head. And it's about these kids who are at the park, and one of them is kind of picking on this other kid who has red hair. And then there's a kid who has one hand who kind of steps in and kind of helps smooth things over, whatever. And it was written after I was a kid, so I had missed it. But a friend of mine who's an elementary school teacher pointed it out, and it's the same sort of thing where it was like just a character in the story, not the focal point, but just a part of it. And so it was so cool, pardon me, to see that, and to see where that goes. And so I just wanted to, like I said, take a few minutes with you and kind of hear the background of that story. I'm going to take another drink real quick. Sorry.
It's okay.
So just to say thank you and that it's a big deal. Like, um, it is one of those things, like you said. I just want it to be a part of the
Yeah,
story, which it is, and that I think is the best thing about it. And so
yeah,
I know there are a lot of kids who are gonna. I have already had probably a half a dozen people who said, "Oh, I went and bought it," or they're getting it for Christmas, to have it as part of their kids lit in their house for their kids. So,
yeah, yeah. I mean, my hope is that, one, that whether it's a kid who is dealing with that or not,
mhm,
that they can just see that as like, they don't have to like make a big deal out of it. Like, it can just be, like you said, like, they're just part of society. It's just part of
right,
normal life. And
right,
um and I think, the more we become accustomed to seeing it, like
mhm,
the more that moves things forward. Because I know, like I said, when I was a kid, like, you didn't see that
mhm,
in the comics or on the screen. It was, I think one of the things that also happened to me in art school, I used to draw these kind of bald, generic figures, and
sure,
one of the faculty asked me, why are they always bald? And I was like, well, I'm trying to make it universal so that everyone can
mm,
relate to it. And they're actually like, well, if you give them haircuts, yes, it's a specific haircut, but now they're a real person, and
yeah,
people will be able to relate to that more. And I think,
mm,
it's that idea, like, you can make you don't have to make everyone the same and show everyone the same
right.
to like have people relate to it. Like, people will actually be able to relate to this no matter where they come from.
Mhm.
um and so, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's, the book that I wrote is similar in that I wanted to make sure, like, the main character has one hand, and that was important to me. But then the other characters are all, they're tall or they're
Yes.
short or they have freckles or whatever. So you realize that we're all different. And I was like, I had a feeling that it would connect with the limb different community for sure. But it has connected everywhere because, like you said, when you make it that specific, now suddenly it's a learning opportunity for everyone to say,
Yeah.
oh yeah, well, this is, it once they get past, especially kids. I mean, kids are hilarious anyway, but once they get past that initial, like, whoa, like, that's shocking, I've never seen that before,
Yeah.
and then they figure out that you can eat with one hand, then they're fine.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah,
move forward.
I mean, I have to say, I really like in the book how, not to spoil, but,
Right.
like, it's like the line about how the kids would have the same response to someone pulling $100 bill out of their
Oh yeah.
wallet. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like that idea. Like, and I think that's one of the reasons why doing this in a kid's book is important, is because,
Mhm.
I mean, it's probably too late for a lot of people who are my age or older.
Right.
It's like they're already down the curmudgeon path to, like oblivion. Um but, kids, that, like, there's still a chance to,
Mhm.
have them grow up and be more open and accepting
Right.
than previous generations.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And it's, I mean, we're similar in age, I think, and I felt
Mhm.
the same way as the kid who had one hand. I mean, there was nothing, like, there were no groups, there were no,
Mhm.
I mean, and I was fine with that, but it is just such a different age, and so, like you said, getting that out and in front of people and giving that opportunity for them to learn and to say, hey, this is just normal. Maybe you've never seen a person at your local grocery store or the local Target or something like that, but when you see somebody, you're going to be like, oh, I'm familiar with this because I've seen it in, Batman, Robin and Howard, or Indifferent is Awesome, or on the Target commercial or whatever. So it won't be as surprising. They're just a
Yeah.
person like we are. So I love that. I think that's really great. Um, so I just want to, I'll just tell everybody again, you should go get Batman, Robin, and Howard. It's a great story. Um, I mean, anybody will like it, but I mean, it's geared towards 8 to 12. I guess
Mhm.
is the kind of the age that's there. But like I said, I loved it myself, and it really gives you an opportunity. if, like you said, if you have a kid who has one hand, they're going to see themselves in it. If you don't, you can kind of, maybe bring that up at some point. Just say, hey, did you notice anything? I'm also curious how many kids even notice it. You said like, oh, I'm so glad somebody saw that. I
Yeah.
wonder how many kids do see that. I'm curious
Yeah, I'll
about
be
that as
interested
well.
to hear once I start doing if getting back to more regular school visits and
Yeah, yeah,
things. So
for sure. Nice. Well, thank you for taking a few minutes with us and kind of sharing your story and
yeah, of
the
course.
story behind Pete. Really means a lot. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.